Compendium Maleficarum. Collected in 3 books from many sources by Brother Francesco Maria Guatso, of the Order of S. Ambrose AD NEMUS, showing the iniquitous and execrable operations of witches against the human race and the divine remedies BT which they may be frustrated. Edited with notes by the Rev. Montague. Summers translated by E. A. Ashwin. John Rodker. 1929. London. This edition is of 1275. Copies only, this copy being numbered. Printed in Great Britain by Richard Clay and Sons, Limited. Bungay, Suffolk. T.O. The Most Illustrious and Right Reverend Lord Orazio Maffei, Cardinal of the Holy Roman Church and ever vigilant protector of the Order of S. Ambrose, Fra Francesco Maria Guazzo, a humble brother of the same order, giveth greeting. OM0ST Vigilant Prelate. 3 years ago, when I was attending the court of His Serene Highness the Duke of Cleves and Jülich, who was vexed and bound by many spells of witchcraft, I put together and composed this book which I have called Compendium Maleficarum, and I have, moreover, filled it with various and most ample examples, with the sole purpose that men, considering the cunning of witches, might study to live piously and devoutly in the Lord. And although it may provoke the idle jests of the censorious, for what is more difficult than to satisfy every palate? Yet I conceive that it will be of some avail to those who would escape the mortal venom of sorcerers. When I had, then, determined to print it, I began to look for a patron under whose auspices it might be more securely brought to the light. Then, most illustrious and most reverend protector, whom no one has excelled in genius, gifts of mind and body and countless graces, did you stand out in my mind as one who has given public proof that your most eminent courage is joined to a like degree of learning, a patron who, far from despising a humble writer, would rather extend to him your greatest favour and more than ordinary kindness. Having these considerations in my mind, therefore, I was assured that you were preeminently suited to act the part of a Maecenas towards such as devoted themselves to the furtherance of sound doctrine, among whom I count myself the humblest, and I determined to light this newborn work upon its way with the torch of your most famous name, and although you are worthy of a far nobler work, I venture to dedicate to you this little book which has not been compiled without some labour. And if fars is my hope, you will accept it wholly and generously with that fair candour which is yours. It may assuredly be expected that those carping critics, who will tolerate nothing that does not savour of perfect genius and unremitting industry, will turn a blind eye to its faults. Farewell, and may Guatso be written among those who are wholeheartedly attached to you. Milan, May, 1608. Preface. To the reader. Among the countless blessings which the divine mercy daily confers upon the whole human race, and especially upon his faithful, I esteem this to be the most particular, the power to discover the malice and wickedness of our enemies, both visible and invisible, so that, recognizing their cunning, we may counteract their stumbling blocks and temptations. And since, P.S. LXXI, the pride of them that hate God is daily increased and ever grows, and the venomous enemy of the human race, whose fierceness waxes ever greater, does not fear to sow in our path the sharpest thorns of sorrow and tribulation and all sorts of maladies. Although he himself is fearful of being tormented, Therefore he essays his utmost to increase his own eternal punishment by leading as many men as he can to hell, and to deride, despise, and insult the most excellent and divine likeness of God which has been washed in the precious blood of Christ, and to turn man's freedom to slavery. Therefore each one of us ought to search his heart to keep it free from the malice of the devil, for he goeth about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour, and even though his heart may be pierced and torn by his enemies' weapons, yet the devil leaves nothing unattempted and dares everything. When he sees men of weak and timid mind, he takes them by storm. When he finds them dauntless and firm, he becomes as it were a cunning fox to deceive them, for he has 1,000 means of hurting us, and he uses countless methods, superstitions and curious arts, to seduce men's minds from God and lead them to his own follies, and all these he wondrously performs by means of illusions and witchcraft. Therefore it is agreed that this sort of evils has been disseminated to the destruction of men's bodies and souls by the devil and his fiends through the agency of warlocks, witches, sorcerers and diviners, and in proof of this the present book will give a sure indication of the truth. And that each man may be able to guard himself, let him seriously read and carefully digest this book, which I have called Compendium Maleficarum, for just as there are shown to be various means and methods of inflicting injury, so there are various remedies by which these harms may be met and dispersed when they are recognized. If therefore, reader, there be anything in this book which holds your attention and points you the way to a remedy, I lift up my hands in thanks to God, who to his own greater glory, and the confusion of devils, has permit the temptation of our souls that the just may be made perfect and the wicked cast into hell. Therefore the demons do but work in accordance with the design and permission of Almighty God. Editor's Introduction. The ancient origins of the local Milanese order Ambrosiani or Ambrosini, of which Francesco Maria Guatso was so eminent and honoured a member, are buried in obscurity, although the brethren themselves, perhaps with more devotion than exactness, were ever wont to refer their foundation to no less a figure than the great S. Ambrose himself. It is very possible, and even probable, that some old traditions had actually been handed down from the illustrious father who had taken so deep an interest in monasticism and so closely watched the beginnings of the cloister throughout his diocese. However that may be, in the earlier decades of the 14th century certain solitaries and hermit priests dwelling near Milan gradually adopted the cenobitic life, making it their pious custom to assemble at stated intervals during the day for solemn office and united prayer. About this very time 3 young nobles, Alessandro Crivelli, Alberto Bisozzo, and Antonio della Pietra, Santa, disgusted with the licentiousness of the aristocratic society and court of Giovanni II, had sought refuge in retreat from the world, and taking as their anchor-holder wood not many leagues from the city, here they built a humble chapel which soon became the common oratory of a regular community, and this forest sanctuary may not untruly be said to have been the cradle of the Ambrosian order. In 1375 Pope Gregory XI, who some 12 months before had approved the congregation of the Spanish hermits of S. Jerome, gave the Milanese frati the rule of S. Augustine, adding thereto a number of particular constitutions, and assigning as their name Sisi Fratres Sancti Ambrosii ad NEMUS. They were, moreover, empowered to elect their own superiors, subject to the confirmation of the Archbishop of Milan. A habit was prescribed with broad scapula, a stuff girdle pendant as is the Augustinian cincture, a voluminous cowl and capuce, a mighty mantle in which to walk abroad, in colour all of chestnut brown ***. It does not seem certain whether the Ambrosians, ad NEMUS, were by rule discalced or shod. Heliot, Histoire des Ordres Monastiques, 1715, Volume 4, p. 52. Gives an engraving, Religieur de l'ordre de S. Ambrose ad NEMUS, who is wearing sandals. But there appear to have been modifications, and this detail differed from time to time. Originally, no doubt the brethren were discalced, but a mitigation tolerated some form of footgear. The Ambrosian liturgy, both for Mass and choir, must be followed. The order henceforth was canonically established. Of the history of the Ambrosiani comparatively few details are known, and it is hardly necessary here to rehearse them any length. It will suffice to say that various houses were founded, and that for more than half a century each monastery remained entirely independent, their only connection being the fact that each adopted the same rule. In 144 Eugenius IV united all the existing foundations in or congregation under a Master General who was to reside at the original convent where in future a full chapter met every 3 years. It was found that the old discipline had become somewhat relaxed in the time of S. Carlo Borromeo, but at the request of the brethren this great saint presided in person over their chapter of Ijig, and with his encouragement the earlier strictness was soon restored. Subjects, nonetheless, were few, and on if August T5-9 Sixtus V issued a bull joining the Ambrosiani with the Apostolini or Barnabites, * the brothers of S. Barnabas, not to be confused with the Barnabites, clerks regular, Conscientiae Recularis Sancti Pauli, founded by S. Antonio A. Aria Zachariah in I-53° J now served by the Irish Dominicans. S. Pancrazio Fury Lemura was seriously damaged in 1849. BNT has been restored. J for an account of the connection of the Ambrosini with this church and the jealousy OJ the civic authorities who wished to appoint their own chaplains. See the article Ambrosiani by Monsignor Giovanni Galbiati in the Grande Encyclopedia Italiana. **** who claimed the Apostle S. Barnabas as their founder, but whose constitution, as then followed at any rate, had been approved by Rome early in the 15th century. The congregation thus formed was now generally known as the Brethren of S. Ambrose ad NEMUS and S. Barnabas, and upon the engraved title page of the second edition, 1626, of Guazzo's Compendium Maleficarum, the two saints are duly depicted as patrons in full pontificalia. Outside the Archdiocese of Milan the Ambrosiani held for a while only 2 houses, both of which were at Rome, San Clemente and San Pancrazio. In Milan itself their most important monastery was that attached to the Church of San Pnmo, a parish which in more recent years was divided among 3 other churches, S. Bartolomeo, S. Babila, and San Andrea. The church of San Primo and the adjoining cloister stood hard by the Porta Onentale where was the Collegio Elvetico at the opening of the Strada Marina. The religious also served the church of S. Ambrogio della Vitona, which was built, 1348, at Parabigo/M Thanksgiving for the famous battle won there by Team Milanese in 1339. However popular at Milan, where they were held in high honor. Even in the day of their greatest prosperity the Ambrosiani had never been more than a purely local congregation, and when their numbers sensibly diminished and several of their houses fell vacant it is not surprising to find that the question of suppressing the order was more than once debated. Eventually, on April 1645, by the bull Chionium, Innocent X dissolved the surviving monasteries, including that of Para, Biago, which remained, directing that they should be assigned to secular priests. The details of these arrangements were entrusted to 2 cardinals, Odescalchi and Monti, who acted on behalf of the Holy See. It must not be supposed that the dissolution was in any way intended as a censure or reflection upon the Ambrosiani. At that time certain reforms were being essayed in various directions, and of these one was the diminution of the very many provincial congregations and obscure local orders, whose continuance involved a vast complexity of business and affairs, whose members were few and dwindling, whose purpose had been served, in most cases admirably and devotedly served throughout the years, but whose day was gone. Even as one of our own poets has said, God fulfills himself in many ways, lest one good custom should corrupt the world. The Ambrosiani were not without their holy names. There were Beati in the calendar of the order, blessed Alberto Bisozzo, blessed Antonio Gonzaga of Mantua, blessed Filippo of Fermo, blessed Herodo of Monza, blessed Gardate, blessed Giovanni, blessed Placido, and many more, a noble roll of sanctity. They boasted two eminent scholars and writers of renown, the pious and strictly orthodox Paolo Fabulotti, whose authoritative De Potestate Papi Super Concilium, first published at Venice in 1613, ran into several editions, Ascanio Tasca, who left the Society of Jesus to follow the more cloistered Ambrosian life, and who rose to be Master General, Michele Mulazani, a Piedmontese, who in his day had also governed the order, Vicario Visconti, and Francesco, Maria Guazzo. Even the recent and particular researches of Monsignor Professor Giovanni Galbiati, the distinguished prefect of the Ambrosian Library, have failed to discover any details of the life of Guatso. Perhaps this is because there is really little to know of the contemplative and monastic life, little to know of Guatso save what we may gather from his own printed works. The archives and cartularies of the Ambrosiani whence. Illuminati Watcher's Note. Pages 8 and 9 were not scanned properly, they will be skipped. Page 10. Directions: no country, town, village, or district, no class of society is free from it. Lambert Dano, writing in 1574, tells us that in some districts, the witches are so defiant and audacious that they say openly, if only they had an eminent and renowned man for their captain, they should become so strong and numerous that they could march against a powerful king in open battle and easily vanquish him with the help of the arts. Well, White James I, whilst yet he only held his Scottish throne, fear the dark. Earl of Bothwell. In later years too the boast of the witches has been fearfully fulfilled. Timely indeed was the writing of the Compendium Maleficarum, and necessary. A second edition, ex Collegii Ambrosini Typographia, appeared in 1626. The text here is very considerably amplified by further examples and the extended discussion of nice theological points. An exorcism is added together with various benedictions, especially for the sick, such as the Modus Curandi Fibricitantes. The second work of Guatso was a life of blessed Alberto Bisozzo, one of the earliest of the Ambrosium, and especially venerated as the propagator of the order. Vita del Beato Alberto Bisozzo, Milan, Javava, PTO, 1625. This notable piece was widely esteemed for the elegance of its style, and brought Guatso no small increase of reputation as a skilled hagiographer. The monograph was reprinted by the Milanese House of Carrara, PTO, I68p in 1643, was issued at Venice. Guatso's last book, Tu Principe Perfetto, I2 Mo. It has been conjectured that Tu Principe Perfetto may be a posthumous volume, in which case we should date Guatso I's death circa 1640, and it has further been suggested that the dissolution of the monasteries of the Ambrosium, a suppression determined some years before, was purposely delayed until after the demise of so honoured and famous a member of that community. Francesco Guatso comes before us as a writer and scholar of no mean order. In the course of the Compendium Maleficarum, I have counted quotations from and references to more than 250 authors, and these illustrations are never those of some mere commonplace book or random excerpts, but pertinent, illuminative, well-chosen and aptly employed. His reading and erudition were prodigious. Steeped in the lore of councils and in the Fathers, both Greek and Latin, the writings of S. Basil, S. Gregory J. Vasianzen, S. Athanasius, S. John Chrysostom, S. Cyril, Tertullian, Lactantius, S. Augustine, S. Ambrose, S. Jerome, S. Bernard, S. Peter Damian, Dionysius the Carthusian, and many other a mighty name are easily familiar to him. With equal facility will he cite Cedrenus and Pontano, Pliny and the Dominican Sylvester, Lucian and Liutprand, Hippocrates and Francesco Mottioli, the Catholic champion, Bishop Dubravsky of Olmütz and the Protestant Philip Camerarius, the son of Melanchthon's partner in the Augsburg Confession. Although the Compendium Maleficarum was at once accepted as supremely authoritative by all contemporaries, and later demonologists have not been slow to commend, appraise, and make final appeal to this most salutary and excellent treatise, the learned and judicious Sinistrari manifestly and formally not merely follows but actually paraphrases entire more than one chapter when discussing dark problems of witchcraft. It is surprising indeed that Francesco Maria Guazzo has never generally achieved the wide renown and high reputation of a Bodin, a Remy, a Boget, or a Delanca. The reason for this no doubt lies in the fact that these writers were also men of action, each of whom perforce from his very office and estate stood largely in the public eye, and wrought zealously for the public will. Jean Bodin won fame as a politician, a deputy of the Third Estate to the States General of Blois, attorney general at Lane. Nicolas Remy for 15 years held the helm as Privy Councillor and Chief Judge in the Duchy of Lorraine. Boget was Grand Juge de St. Claude Au Comte de Bourgogne, Pierre de Lanca, the wealthy magistrate of Bordeaux, served as Commissioner Extraordinary in the witch trials of Labord. Francesco Maria Guazzo remained but a humble friar, the subject of an obscure and solitary congregation. And yet the Compendium Maleficarum * is a treatise of no less value and importance than the famous De Menomini des Sorciers and the Tableau de Inconstance des Mauvais Anges et Demons. Guatso analyses and describes as perhaps no other demonologist has set out with equal conciseness and clarity the whole practice and profession of witchcraft. Although never sparing of illustration and detail, he does not indeed draw examples from the trials of those whom he had examined and judged as do Boget and de Lanca, a feature which lends their work an especial and personal value. But the Compendium Maleficarum may be taken to be in some sort a complementary volume, an essential textbook of the subject, as it were, a tractate which probes and proves every circumstance of Satanism and sorcery. **** Curiously enough, there is no mention of the book either in Gray's or Brunet. **** Editor's Introduction to the Historian. To the occult student, Guazzo's work is of incalculable worth. And it is not too much to say that he can pretend to little knowledge of that evil society and their horrid devices who is not intimately conversant with these pages. It will be found moreover that not the least valuable of these chapters are those which treat de remediis diuinis, and in particular the sections de Eucharistia, dt Signo Sancti Cruits and Auxilium Singulari bt Marie Virga is, perquam, ut 8 Bernardus. Deus numbers voluit totem habere. Montague Summers. Infesto BMV. Divini Pastoris Matris, 1929 Foreword. Although the Compendium Maleficarum, both from the encyclopedic learning of the author and the scientific precision of his details, must rank as one of the most important of all witchcraft manuals. Not only, largely owing to his severe concentration of thought and expression and the many technicalities, is the original Latin more than ordinarily difficult, but Guatso was ill-served both in 1608 and in 1626 by his printers. For these two, which are the only, editions of the book are marred by a superabundance of most riddling typographical errors. Indeed, before the work could be well rendered into English, I found that it was necessary to prepare something like a definitive recension of the text, a preliminary which, if mechanical enough, has cost me no little time and labor. To write a full excursus upon the Compendium Maleficarum, giving further and later examples of the many ill observances and devices of witchcraft, the transvection of the sorcerers to their rendezvous, the abominations of the Sabbath, the worship of the demon, the pledges of diabolical servitude, the osculum infame, the revelry, the dances, the lewdness of the incubus and the succubus, the malice and evil charms of Satanists, all of which and many more black secrets of Gotti Guazzo has so amply and so authoritatively displayed, would be to pen a second History of Witchcraft. Another volume as copious and as detailed as the Compendium itself. However interesting and useful it would have proved to afford modern instances of the continued practices of this horrid society, I have judged it best to reserve so extensive a relation for a separate occasion, and therefore I have furnished this work of Guatso with a minimum of annotation. Even so, I am very well aware that in the glosses will be found information some may perhaps deem superfluous. On the other hand, I am constantly being requested to illustrate these manuals of the demonologists by far more extensive commentaries than my wont, so that in fine it is, I fear, not possible entirely to satisfy every student and reader. In the present case, I frankly acknowledge that on account of practical limitations of space, if for no other reason, I have felt obliged entirely to pass over no small number of points concerning which I was minded to write something fully. As also was it necessary for me to treat with economy other details not unworthy of closer investigation. To the most learned project of the Ambrosian Library, Monsignor Professor Giovanni Galbiati. I am greatly indebted for the trouble and pains he has so generously bestowed on my behalf in making very particular researches concerning Francesco Maria Guazzo and in communicating to me important bibliographical and historical details of the Ambrosium. My best thanks are due to Dr. H. T. Norman, not only for the loan of many rare pieces on witchcraft from among the treasures of his library, but also for the very real and inspiring interest he has so cordially taken in the present series. Montague Summers.